Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower? Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we are, another edition of GatherGeeks.
Our guest today is Dan Brice, who is Vice President of Brand Experience at United Entertainment Group, a Daniel J. Edelman company. There, he has worked with clients such as Taco Bell, KFC, and PwC on experiential events. Previously, the Chicago-based Brice has worked at All Terrain, Agency EA, Marketing Works, and in the Mayor's Office of Special Events in Chicago. But today, we are talking about something totally different. Chicago is closing in on a potentially huge shift. On January 1st, 2020, recreational cannabis is set to become legal. The big question is, what is the impact on events?
That is true. We had him give us his perspective in this upcoming interview.
Exactly. He's going to lay out the projected scope of the industry, his predictions for best practices of cannabis brands that want to activate, and the potential brand partnerships, as well as dipping into legal issues and risk management, etiquettes, and quality assurance. Let's listen.
There was a piece of legislation passed and signed by the governor about cannabis. Why don't you give us what you think is going to happen in your state and how it will impact our business?
Yeah, I mean, the landscape of events obviously is already changing across the country in states that have legalized recreational marijuana. But as Chicago becomes the 11th state to legalize recreational in January 1st, 2020, it's just going to be, really fascinating to see how this plays out in the event and experiential marketing space. We have four of the largest cannabis companies based in Chicago here. Cresco Labs, Korean Thumb Industries, Grassroots, to name a few. And we're expected to see this be $1 billion industry rather quickly. U.S. sales are expected to reach, I think like $23 billion by 2023. So,
Jeez.
I mean, it's 3 years from
That's
now.
unbelievable.
It is. And I mean, California will remain the top, obviously, but Illinois and Michigan, where it is also the bill is passed for recreational to be legal, they're expected to rival Colorado and Nevada as far as revenue growth and what that industry looks like. So, and a lot of that is just due to higher density of population. If you think about it, a lot of the states that are on either on the East Coast or more centralized just have more people. It's more density population. So as opposed to out west where it's a little bit more sparse. So
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of these companies are seeing a huge growth opportunity in a lot of these states, especially in a city like Chicago, that's the third largest city in the U.S. I mean, even just the 4th of July, I just read an article recently. I think it was they said nationwide sales spiked to 400 million. Or it was 60% above average during the week leading up to 4th of July.
Wow.
Which is, just staggering. So, look, we're going to face challenges, and the industry already is facing challenges as far as how it's regulated, right? I mean, it's a little bit like the Wild Wild West right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of roadblocks, primarily because it's illegal under federal law. So that becomes an issue for a lot of reasons, financially being probably the most important one of those. And so it certainly restricts, advertising and marketing and what we can do as marketers and event producers. I think how it will succeed, I think there aren't a lot of big brand names established right now. And so I think brands that will win out will be first and foremost compliant, right? They're going to do it. They're going to do it the right way. They'll have purpose. They're going to focus on education, I think, and alternative health, and they're gonna really highlight the alternative health and wellness benefits of cannabis. Whether it's pain relief or sleeping better or mental health. Certainly as an alternative to opioids, which has obviously crushed our society.
Sure.
And I think cannabis brands that follow a similar blueprint or template as other highly regulated industries, such as alcohol or tobacco or pharma, I think those are the ones that are going to win out. Which is why a lot of those brands now are hiring some of the best and brightest from the adult beverage category or other CPG brands.
Are you guys pitching a lot of these brands yet? Are you? Are they reaching out?
You know what? They're reaching out. It's we're not proactively pitching. We get some interest and some inquiries. And sometimes we'll just either hit a stalemate because there's just so many unknowns, or so we're getting a lot of interest in inquiries. It just hasn't really kind of fully blossomed into anything that's come to fruition yet. But yeah, absolutely. And I was just talking to a friend who he and his team produce two of Chicago's most prominent summer music events, and he said that his agency has received several inquiries for partnerships and sponsorship activations on site at their events. But again, due to on-site consumption being illegal for now, it would really limit these brands, to be more focused on education, more of an awareness play, highlighting product benefits, showing consumers what the packaging looks like so they can be, more easily recall it when they go to retail. We've even, he's even seen like couponing, and other drive to retail tactics that are being deployed at events where consumption isn't allowed.
Where is consumption? I think where will is consumption allowed at a private event?
It is in some cases, and that's, I think, the creative workaround that some brands are having success with, especially in the state of California. I know that Coachella recently had an activation where Rolling Stone partnered with Harvest Rolling Papers for the Harvest House of Cannabis, I believe it was called. They created like this pop-up cannabis house in Palm Springs over Coachella weekend. They had like live performances, they had product sampling.
Means actually smoking,
and I think they got
or consuming.
Yes,
because it's a private event.
Edibles. Pre-rolls, because it was a private event, so it wasn't on the grounds at Coachella. They got creative and rented an Airbnb property, and I know a lot of other brands that are doing this, where they're renting a property or taking over a venue, a private venue, adjacent to or in close proximity to the main event, and that allows them to sample product, which isn't allowed on the main grounds of whatever the main festival is. In this case, it was Coachella. I know there was a really robust event activation footprint that was at Outside Lands in San Francisco, which featured a designated area called Grasslands. But it was removed from the primary event site. It was heavily guarded. There were probably 8 to 12 cannabis brands showcasing their product. And those activations ranged anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million, depending on the brand and kind of what they were putting on. Some were very elaborate and some were, a 10 by 10 tent with a table and some product on it. So, it really is varying.
So flip over to the idea of an event organizer who is not connected to one of the big brands, but they want to use cannabis at their event. How do they do that?
They have to do their homework.
Yeah.
They have to do their due diligence.
How do they do that?
They have to
call you.
You have to very, very similar to the way we were approached another highly regulated sector, which is adult bev.
Yeah.
Anytime we are either selling or serving liquor at any of our events, we obviously have to obtain the right permits and licensing, to do so. And so that's where it starts, is knowing your local county laws. And it doesn't just come down to state laws. It really does come down to kind of county in some cases, because every county is a little bit different. So knowing your jurisdiction, having really good relationships and contacts with, politicians, lawmakers. You make sure that you have really good legal counsel, that you have really good insurance counsel. Those are key. Bring those people in early before you spend too much time spinning your wheels and creating an event that, if at the heart of it is going to be any kind of cannabis related sampling or consumption or even not, even if it's just more of an educational and awareness play, you have to understand what is permitted and what's not.
Building a memorable experience for your guests means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event. In the city of Chicago, do you know whether you can consume?
You cannot.
You cannot. But you think that that's going to be shifting?
I'm not saying there aren't people that don't. There will be brands and there will be agencies that are much more risque, if you will, and or less risk adverse, who will put on events that probably aren't completely up to code, or compliant, and that is a risk if they're willing to take that. Maybe they're a startup brand, right? It's probably not going to be your more well-established brands that have a lot of stakeholders and are going to risk, or put their master brand in jeopardy. So you are not, as far as we know now, there's going to be no consumption, on site at events. I mean, that's going to evolve, though. I really do. I think that will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years, and once I think it's one of those things that as it becomes more regulated and stabilized, I don't think anything will be more impactful to driving sales than trial and sampling and demos.
Right.
So it's the main ways that brands differentiate themselves from one another, right? And I think brands who create unique experiences around those moments will really set themselves apart. But I think in the meantime, it's getting creative. I think eventually you will see more CBD infused, F&B options, by James Beard award-winning chefs at a lot of events. I think you're going to see, you're already seeing kind of like bud bars, right? Or, designated like vape and smoking lounges, probably wellness activities, aiming to reduce stress. That'll become programming at some events. Entertainment, what role will, talents and celebrities and influencers play in this space? I think it's going to be really interesting. You already see, Snoop Dogg and, Marley brands, and even Jimmy Buffett and JC recently became a chief brand strategist for a California-based cannabis company. So everybody's getting in this game. Heck, even Chicago native Jim Belushi already has plans to drive a Bluesmobile topped with a joint instead of the giant PA speaker on Chicago's Lake Street when this becomes legal on January 1st, right? So it's, so as event producers, our job will be to do our due diligence, make sure that we create safe and controlled environments for attendees so that they feel at ease and also give authorities the peace of mind that they need. There's going to be things, it'll be very similar to, big tobacco or alcohol, adult bev sponsorships that have taken place in the past or currently, where you're going to have to ID and make sure there's age limiting and that we're meeting health codes and that we're securing the right permits. We might have to take out extra or special insurance. We might have to have attendees sign waivers. All those key things will need to be considered. And then on-site staff and etiquette training. And quality assurance will be really key to successful events that include cannabis.
This is a whole brave new world.
It is. And I think we'll be taking cues and key learnings from our colleagues in California, and other states who have legalized recreational before us to better understand the do's and don'ts of producing events and activating brands in the cannabis space.
But your focus, it seems like, how to if it's going to get to $23 billion in 3 years, it's going to have to have some marketing that is going to really have to be pretty explosive in terms of getting the word out, right? In terms of how people can buy stuff.
Absolutely.
And so they've got to do it. I mean, in Canada, the stores are absolutely like going to an upscale mall in some places.
It's like going into an Apple store.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's kind of unbelievable how they're doing it. And
it is. I think it's only a matter. I think it's only. Go ahead. I'm sorry, David.
Is the Canadian experience going to be similar to ours, or is ours just going to be much bigger because of the size of the market?
I think ours will be bigger because I feel like everything in the U.S. is bigger, right? Just we go big on everything. I think that not only from just a scale and a growth perspective, but kind of keeping up with the Joneses and just having the I think from just the density of people that are in our major metropolises in and of itself will spur on that growth. So yeah, I'm not as familiar with Canadian laws and kind of like what brands are doing in Canada. That would be actually an interesting kind of topic to research and look into, because I think that's, again, I think the states that are legalizing recreational now will really be using blueprints and best practices of states and maybe even other countries that have made it legal. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before you see a stadium or a large entertainment venue sell naming rights to a cannabis company or a brand, So when the White Sox win their next World Series, they just might be celebrating on their home turf of Cresco Field or something.
And you don't see the controversy, when our parents were saying don't ever smoke pot. It seems like that era has passed, or do you still think could be a huge backlash?
Yeah, I still think it exists. There's always going to be backlash for drugs, whatever it might be, and there's always going to be someone that can show you the benefits and the pros of using a certain drug, and they're going to find critics and scientists and doctors that will find the downside of it, right? And it's there's a lot of unknowns, right, around the effects of that's sweeping the nation of Juul, right? Mm-hmm. of kids using Juul as a nicotine supplement, or even vaping, cannabis. Like what are the side effects or the long-term effects of that? There's no studies or research other than these stories you hear of like liquid lung or something after someone has a long weekend of partying. But look, there's always going to be the unknown. I'm a big believer in like moderation, like just moderation and like whatever suits yourself. I think if this has any impact, which I think it does, on the opioid crisis and provides sick people that are in pain, another alternative to opioids, I am all for it. That said, I'm not a doctor and a scientist, and I don't know what the long-term effects of it are.
Well, the one thing we do know, if tobacco is a model, you're going to get very creative marketing programs. We're going to go back to LSMF. What is it? Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. That campaign and some of the classics in marketing, LSMFT or something like that. So I mean, it really drove a lot of the agency business.
Absolutely, and I think, I think it's just going to be really, interesting to see, how this evolves. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, the legalization will,
right?
But how it goes to market will be interesting, and what brands do from an activation standpoint and how they stand out will be really interesting, and to see how both social media and the digital world will complement and kind of work off of the live event space as well.
Well, it's already a big thing in when I talk to a lot of the people that are wedding planners and things like that. This is, whether they plan it or not, this is a big part of every young person's wedding, from what I heard, and so it's already invaded that space pretty much. Yeah,
I mean, I would have to think that it will be, that it'll be regulated, or will it be regulated as strict as tobacco and alcohol, even more so. I think once, look, you just got to follow the money. I think once states realize that they're getting, making more more revenue off taxes of cannabis products than any other probably source of income, much more than the riverboat casino,
and the lottery.
They're going to be right, and yeah, exactly. The lottery. I think you're going to see event producers, to your point, like find creative ways to bring brands into that space, and again, the ones that are doing it in a safe and controlled way are the ones that are going to win out, because that's what will stabilize the economy. That's what will give consumers a more confidence that there's that it's controlled and it's not just kind of willy-nilly. You're just going to see a lot of consumer opinions and behaviors change, and therefore the purchasing decisions will change along with that.
Okay, David, thank you for that conversation. We're back in our podcast studio. While legalization will be new in Chicago, some of this has been done before in California, Colorado, and Canada. These are all C cities. I don't know what's going on there, or states, countries. I'll tell listeners that in our show notes, they can check out the further reading section to find some of BizBash's past coverage of this topic. But this is going to be an important milestone, though, when Chicago joins this crowd. It's momentum and the realization that, yes, event planners and brand marketers need to get up to speed.
It's also sort of a sign that the biggest market is the U.S., and right now, all the effort is on all the sort of the energies around Canada. But there is going to be a huge economic benefit to this happening in the U.S. And I think we're just in the tipping point where this is going to happen.
Right. Yeah. He said everyone's getting in this game. And it's also, as he pointed out, a new source of business as these brands want to hold their own events for awareness and education. So thinking about it from the event industry perspective, it's not only how can you be prepared to incorporate it into your own events if you're asked, but if you're looking to develop new business, this may be a sector that you want to target.
For any of us boomers, this shows a huge swing in attitudes about everything once again. But with that said, Beth, what is going on at BizBash?
I wanted to highlight the BizBash 1000. I mentioned, last week, our fall issue that contains this issue, but I really wanted to call this out. Last year, we debuted it as the BizBash 500 and included the U.S. and Canada. And this year, we expanded to 1000 and just focused on the U.S. We will have a separate list for Canada later this year. But it was a hard job choosing just 1,000 people, and I do mean just 1,000. That in some ways it's a big number, in other ways it's very small. David, what do you see as the value in lists like this?
I think we're helping to celebrate the people in the industry and to show that we want to be upfront. And to be upfront, we have to recognize people. Of course, we're not going to be perfect. And I think that aspirationally, it's good to want to be on a list like that. And it sort of shows who is kind of leading the way. And it's the people, at least on our radar. Mm-hmm. It may not be for the entire industry. It's just the way we're looking at it.
Exactly. And it is a diverse list. In many ways, it's diverse. And we are certainly proud of that. But we also would love to hear feedback. That's the fun thing about lists. I always say with our top 100, maybe your favorite is on here. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something or someone that's not on our radar, or a company that we should have, take a look at. So we welcome that dialogue.
It's a very human process.
Absolutely.
So before we end, we always like to thank the people that helped bring this podcast to you, the listener. Claire Hoffman, our editorial voice, who helps us come up with the right way of describing what we're doing. Rebecca Pappas, who gets the product out there. And of course, Dave Nelson, who is our producer. So thank you all for helping us create this product. And with that, what do we say, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.